It's often asked, how do I start my golf swing? And I think every day we get asked this question in a lesson. There's so many different answers that actually the only person who can answer this is you yourself, because everyone's so different. But there are some common denominators. And I often say, if you watch the tour players on television, there's not a lot we can take from their golf swings. There's certain things they're all doing similar, but in their own unique style. Their techniques are also different. And if you notice how they start their golf swing, that is also very different, but also very similar in the fact that they've all got a trigger move. So how do we find our trigger move? And why is it so important? Because people assume this sport is static. But actually, if you watch the players on television, you'll notice they're always moving. So we're taking what is ultimately considered a static sport and we're making it a reaction, because we're reacting with movement. To react with movement, we need to act to create forces. And it's those forces we create that the body reacts to. The muscles are elastic. The body is designed to be elastic in its movement. The body's got rebound properties. So to rebound, we first have to make an impact. The impact here being the trigger, and the impact location being the ground. We are impacting with the ground, and then we get a rebound. And the swing is the rebound. So it's the same as throwing a ball. If we were to throw a golf ball from a static start, even before you take the arm back, there's going to be some movement with the ground. You're going to feel some interaction, particularly if you want to throw the ball a bigger distance. You're going to start to initiate the movement in this direction with a movement in this direction. So there's a counter move, and that's really what the trigger is. It's a counter move, and we've got to find your counter move. This is not a magic pill that suddenly unlocks a perfect golf swing. What this does is this allows your golf swing to react, but you've also got to have an intention of what that golf swing is going to be, and that's developed through practice, understanding, awareness through practice of what you're going to do when you've pulled the trigger. To do that, we're going to find out what forces you really need to introduce into your trigger, whether it's more horizontal, whether it's more rotational, or some vertical. To be fair, we all need vertical. If we're going to push into the ground, we're using vertical force. We're applying force down. That's a vertical force. That's going to amplify the forces to propel us in the opposite direction, because we've got to shift our body weight. That means the forces we're creating with the ground have to be greater than our body weight to move the body weight. And it's very simple. You do it every day, thousands of times, because you walk. And when you walk, you propel your body weight. And it's that propulsion that we're going to direct in the appropriate way to respond with the golf swing. Think about throwing a ball a great distance, as big a distance as you can possibly throw. The longest throw you can make. From a static start, what would you do? You'd start to probably flex, and you'd probably start to create some kind of counter move. Okay, ready to rotate in the opposite direction. And to get some torque, we're going to create some torque with the ground. Essentially, we're screwing ourselves into the floor with some shift to then fire. So there's a shift, there's going to be some rotation, ready to go back and let everything carry on. So it would be a push. And if you find you're getting stuck, just take a step. And notice what happens. That step is not going forward with the body, it's a step to send you back. So now you can use the ground. So that step actually sends you back, not forward. So when I push the ground, it's throwing me this way, and now I can go. What you'll also do is flex. So I'm dropping into the ground. This allows me to push and accelerate my body mass this way. This is going to let us then push from the ground this way. So a step, and then I can push. We've got horizontal movement. We've got rotational. Now, you might think of rotation as this, and that is absolutely correct, but that's the reaction. The actual action with the ground for rotation would be this. It would be this action will rotate the body. So when you're walking, how does your body rotate? It's the same way we just used the sliders. So the body's going to rotate the same way. And this is something we can introduce into our trigger. You'll see lots of players kicking the knee in, forward pressing, having a little shift. having a little waggle, the old golfer's bum waggle, things like that, shaking the knees, things like this, just little movements, waggling, tapping the floor, getting ready to move, forward press, shifting the knee, tapping the club. You'll see lots of different ways. Even people who are perceived to be quiet movers, maybe like adjusting rows from a dress maybe, even them, they'll be using their feet and ankles. Look closely at the feet and ankles, look closely at the hips. You're going to see what's happening at the hips. That's going to give you an indication of what's going on at the ankles. When you start seeing this happening, movement here, the ankles are rotating, there's pressure moving through the feet. If I stand on this pressure plate and we look at the screen here, if I start to rotate my ankles, look at the torque. See the white line that's rotating like a propeller? But now if you look at me, it's hardly anything, but that's what you've just been seeing there, okay? Even moving the hips. We're creating forces at the ground, we're using these forces. What we need to do is amplify these forces so that we can now react with the golf swing. So we need to create some impulse, we need to increase the force over a very short period of time, and that's what we recognise as a trigger. So we need a combination of torque, we need a combination of mediolateral, which is this horizontal force, and we need a combination of vertical, up and down, flexion, extension. There's going to be little differences. It might not be as big a movement, okay? You might be wanting to create a little bit more torque. You might go more Matthew Wolf and really screw into the floor to get that recoil back out the ground in a corkscrew manner. Or you might go a little bit more Henrik Stenson, a bit more linear, and have more lateral sway. Or you might have a Mickelson with a forward press. You might have a Gary Player with a knee kick to get that leg working, to get the hips rotating, to get the pelvis rotating. All these things can help trigger movement. Encourage movement is probably a better way. I would say it's encouraging the body to move in the backswing. And we're going to use that movement then to recoil. And the recoil's in this direction. It's your backswing. And guess what happens when you let the momentum take you into the backswing? That stretches you and you get a recoil back. So you get the downswing now as a reaction. And then the body stabilises itself just like throwing, and you get a finish. So it's a rebound, and then the body stabilises itself with actually what is another recoil. So you've let the club go, and the body recoils itself. How often will you see the players do that? That's a recoil again in that direction. So it's rebounding in all these different directions because the body is tapping into its elastic stretch potential. That's what it's doing, and we've got to use momentum to do that. Momentum requires acceleration, and this is why your trigger's so important. We've got to accelerate to start everything. So we've talked about the torque. You could use sliders, or if you've got laminate flooring in the socks, be careful. Just slide in your feet. Come back to square, or parallel if you like, a normal stance, hip width, and then do a little jump and slide the feet. You could even do what I'm doing here, just on the floor. Slide the feet, come back to the starting position, then go the other way. So one foot goes forward, one foot goes back, and you're fully extending the knees. So you're going into the balls of your feet. It's almost like tram lines, train tracks, and you're working down the tram lines here with your feet. And then when you start in a normal setup, you can start to feel the direction of those forces help you to rotate the body. But we need some horizontal now. So how do we feel that? That's dead easy. We start with our feet together, and we take a little half step forward, little skip, half step back, and the other way. So this is now vertical with horizontal. So it's propelling me upwards and sending me that way too. So the force vector would be something like in between like this. That's acting through my centre of mass and it's sending me that way. And this is what we need to unload from the ground, send us this way, and multiply all the forces, including those rotational forces, to rotate the body and sequence it to swing the golf club and accelerate it in the backswing. Because we're unweighting from the ground. And what goes up can then go down. And the downward part then is a reaction. So, recognising these very simple things, bit of torque, bit of horizontal with vertical, and then incorporating that into some kind of trigger. So waggling the club, paddling the feet. If you look on the pressure plate, if I keep my feet still and just waggle the golf club, there's not a lot happening at the graph. As soon as I start to just paddle the feet, look at the interaction now. If you notice, I'm hardly moving. You would imagine I'd be doing this, but I'm just doing this. And creating those forces. There's activity at ground level. The body is engaged with the ground with what appears to be very subtle movements, but are actually introducing the dynamism we need for the rebound. So waggling, paddling the feet, you can paddle them, you can lift your feet off if you want, like a little mini stomp with both feet, or you can just keep them on the ground and just apply pressure from foot to foot. Now if we want to apply torque, just like we did with the sliders, imagine you're just sliding the feet back and forth and letting the hips rotate with it. Let the knees move. Now you've got some torque. So if you look at the graph here, look at the activity going off and look at the torque. You can see the white line, that line of pressure between the feet, it's rotating. We've got torque which we can react with. So we've got torque at the ground that we can react to with the swing. Let the handle move. So now I've got the handle moving. Doesn't have to be exaggerated, otherwise that's another manipulation. It's just a reaction. Feel the weight of the golf club. Let the hands and wrists react. Don't be afraid to let them move. Let the face even open or close a little bit. You don't have to let it doesn't have to go wide open, but don't be afraid of it moving a little bit. Feel a bit of twist. Now, if you want to exaggerate the feeling a little bit, just to start with, grab a tennis ball, just cut a tennis ball in half, pop it under your foot, under your lead foot, under the forefoot. That's the toe box of your shoe, and just now squash it with your body weight. And that's now letting your body weight essentially sink into the floor, drop into the floor, and you can add a little bit of twist with it. So now you've got some torque, and you're essentially corkscrewing into the floor, ready to push off the floor and recoil in the opposite direction. So you really are now taking the reins off the horse. This is what we need to do. We've got to drop those reins, we've got to let it freewheel, and you're off. Now, if you're a guy who's already rotating a lot, okay, you might not need to feel that torque. Just feel a little bit of a push into the floor, towards the target and into the tennis ball. What goes down can then go up, because you're going to push. You're going to push into the floor, and that propels you up, back, and it amplifies the acceleration of those rotations, ultimately firing the sequence with more force, which is more speed. Little swings first, just to get used to it. Have a waggle. You can see we've already got this little horizontal movement going on. There's rotation and there's vertical. All the components your golf swing needs to rebound. So then, making sure that's in the right place under the toe box, waggling the club, put the club on the floor if you like, get used to having the club behind the ball, nice and stable, and everything else moving. Sometimes, in an effort for us to move, we have to move the club head. Whereas actually, we can keep the club still. If you're a guy who likes to keep the club quieter behind the golf ball, have a little waggle, place it behind the ball, move everything else. Look at the activity here with the body, but very low level activity at the club head. And then you're ready to go. And just start off with half, three-quarter swings. So you're just initiating that swing. You're also creating the tempo and committing to that tempo. You're finding the tempo for the golf swing. Create the tempo with the trigger. That's the key. And now let the tempo take the swing, and let the rebound continue the golf swing into a finish. And just practice it time and time again. Start to get comfortable being uncomfortable, and just see how it goes, because you might find very quickly this starts to feel more familiar. The swing starts to feel like it's easier. You're letting go, and you can commit to it time and time again. It will actually become the cornerstone of your pre-shot routine. You're actually making a practice swing, walking into the golf ball with the purpose of the trigger, and then letting everything go, and just watching the ball fly, staying in your finish, and letting the whole event take care of itself. Hitting the golf ball was just somewhere in the middle of that, but you were rebounding through all that because you'd got a recognition of the tempo, a feeling of how to let go, a feeling of how to commit. And this, guys, is why the trigger is so important.
Thought you So I'm sitting here, thought I heard my phone